have a question from Logan who's curious about how to roll with black belts hard without being disrespectful. So he says that in his gym, he's wondering about the lower belts like blues and purples and things like that because that's where he is. When he rolls with some of the black belts, he says that he will catch them in a submission, catch them in a sweep, that sort of thing. But when it goes time to finish it, he pulls back. He doesn't really go for it because he doesn't want to be disrespectful to them. This is especially true when he goes with smaller people, smaller black belts. And so he sends the Chewster the question, Chewy, how do you roll with the higher belts, the black belts, and go hard, go after things, but not be disrespectful? So it's a good question, Logan, and one that I had a lot when I was younger, blue belt and purple belt as well. And it's also something where on the other end of being a black belt, right, where I roll with a lot of people, I can tell you there is a certain way that certain people roll where we can go really, really hard and it's all good. I'm glad that roll happened. We had a blast. It was good training. And then I can tell you on the other end, we can go hard or not even as hard as that, right? We can not even go as hard as some of the other times. But it's almost like, ooh, like you feel gross after the roll. I don't want to roll with that person ever again. I didn't like the experience, right? So I'll tell you the difference between the two. There's a little bit of ambiguity to it, but again, if you've been training for a long time, you'll sort of dial it in, and I'll give you something to think about next time you roll with one of the black belts. So recently at some of the different seminars I've been to, and even the Origin camp that I went to recently, I've rolled with several guys where we went pretty darn hard. Right, went after it and got after it, right? And I remember even one point, one of the brown belts at the seminar that I did in Columbus, Georgia, he was asking me like, hey man, I hope I wasn't going too hard, or being too spazzy or whatever. And I told him, I was like, no, you were doing great. You were doing a technique. And he asked that because I turned up my burners a little bit too. I went a little faster because he was going after the submission. So I started going harder. And before you know it, we're battling, right? But I could feel what he was doing. He was going for a technique. It was all good. This past weekend at the Origin camp, I rolled with a couple of black belts, Danny and Brian, and we had some good rolls one day, and we're going back and forth for passing and sweeps and everything else, and afterwards we're all huffing and puffing. It was great rounds, and I'm glad they happened. Those were fantastic rolling sessions, good training. Now, on the other end, I've been to places where I can tell that I'm being headhunted, right? And I guess this is the big difference between the two. Good training can be hard. Training can be very competitive. But that doesn't mean it's a competition. I think that's the difference you have to understand. That's an intention thing. Like when someone rolls with me and they come in and they're headhunting me, I can feel it. I can feel when it's no longer like a training thing and when it's a competition thing, probably because I've competed a lot and I know what that feels like. And so when someone brings that intention into our role, I can feel it. Most of you guys that have been training for a long time, I bet you know what that feels like as well. Sort of on a side tangent, right? I can tell when all kinds of things are going on. I've been with guys long enough where I can roll with them and I can tell if they're having a bad day. Like, hey man, is everything all right? I can tell when my students, if they're newer, I can tell when they're freaking out a little bit, if they're under pressure. I can tell by their breathing, and I can tell, hey, slow down, brother, just breathe for me. I can tell all kinds of things. Just you can feel the energy when you're that connected to someone, right? And if you're very intuitive to it, you can feel it. And so when I roll with someone and they come into that role with the intention of like basically trying to take my scalp and put a feather in their cap, I can tell. I know what's going on right now. Like the Origin camp a year ago when I went there. I got there in the midweek, and when I got there, a couple of the coaches sort of told me, hey, be careful of that guy over there because he was roughing up one of the female black belts. He was going hard with this person. Like he's headhunting. Like he's a belt hunter, right? So I was like, okay, got it. And when I rolled with that guy, that roll wasn't nearly as hard as some of the black belt rolls I had at the camp this year. But after I was done with the roll, I didn't want anything to do with the guy because we're no longer training. I can feel what's going on. And I don't know if this maybe is an issue where, like for me, for instance, I've proven myself to myself plenty of times. I've competed and won stuff like, done the worlds, Nogi worlds, done Nogi pans, the stuff that I find important, placed at trials. Am I the best jiu-jitsu practitioner ever? Of course not. Not even close, but I'm pretty damn good. And I know that I'm good and I have nothing to prove. So when I'm training is about training. It's about me using techniques. It's about me trying to work on my game and improve, right? The other person that I'm rolling with, they're a part of it, right? I need them to get better, but ultimately, look, when I'm rolling hard, I'm testing out my stuff. I'm trying to make my stuff better. I'm not trying to beat this person as if it's going to make any damn difference about my self-worth. The problem is, I think, with people, maybe if you have not proven stuff to yourself, if you haven't won competitions, if you haven't done stuff like that, then you go into these roles sometimes thinking that it matters, right? You're going to go roll with this guy on a day, beat him, and then, again, try to hold on to that for the rest of your life or something like that, right? training doesn't matter. Training matters in the sense of whether or not we're getting better and working towards stuff. But if I beat a guy this day, who gives a damn? The guy might have like had the flu or something. So what if I beat him? He might come back and beat me tomorrow. I rolled with like one of the blue belts and we were playing the truck position. I love that position. And so he was doing something funky with his leg this weekend and he submitted me. It's fine. I mean, I could of course go back and submit him 6 times in a minute or whatever. But again, we're playing the game. We're playing technique. And so again, to sort of go back to you now, Logan, I think that's the difference, right? It's the intention of what you're bringing, or the intention you bring into the role. Why are you going hard? Are you going hard simply because you got to move and you're going to try to execute that technique? Because if that's the case, that's perfectly fine, bro. And again, we use the higher belts as our litmus test, right? When we're coming up, because we want to know, is my technique getting better? Well, if I can hit it against a higher belt, that tells me it's getting better, right? And that's what's important. Not that I beat the black belt, but that my technique worked against a black belt. That means it's getting better, right? And so when you're going with the black belt, if you have that intention of going hard, but at the same time you're focused on what you're actually trying to get out of it, the technique and everything else, I think it's fine. And they'll be able to feel that. Opposed to if you go into the role trying to prove yourself by beating this person, that's in a situation where, again, save that for the competition mats. Go compete. Go do that stuff. Training can be competitive, but it's training. We're trying to improve. Competition to like beat someone and, basically I beat this person. We save that for there. That's what that's there for. And so again, I think that a lot of times people go into the roles like that where they're uber competitive. They haven't proven themselves to themselves, and they sort of bring that into the mat. And I think that's probably what's going on sometimes with people. But if you're not doing that, and if you bring in the intention of I'm trying to work on a technique, I think you'll be fine, Logan. So hopefully that answers your question, brother. I'll talk to you next time.